up in a Nigerian household, a lot of the ways you like get love is by earning it, right? You get good grades, you get a really good job, you become a doctor. I started to see how that was slipping into my relationship with God, where it was like, man, like I did something bad today, man. I don't feel like praying. Not because like I feel like God is looking at me wrong. It's just like I have so much shame.
What helped me heal was therapy, but the main thing, honestly, was my wife, bro. Like, it was just her being her and just showing me her unconditional love and showing me what unconditional love looked like. It showed me that there was another way to be, and there was another way to live life, that I didn't have to be constantly on guard and always trying to fight a motherfucker.
Welcome to Vulnerability Muscle, the empowering podcast challenging norms and guiding you to find strength and power through vulnerability. I'm your host, Reggie D. Ford. In a world that often portrays vulnerability as a sign of weakness, I believe it is a source of tremendous strength and authenticity. Through insightful conversations and thought-provoking interviews, Vulnerability Muscle aims to redefine vulnerability and help listeners develop a new perspective on their own lives. Each episode of Vulnerability Muscle delves into a variety of topics such as mental health, social issues, and mindset shifts. We explore the power of vulnerability in healing, building resilience, and promoting personal growth, as well as fostering meaningful connections. This podcast provides practical tools and strategies to navigate life's challenges, overcome adversity, and create more inclusive and just environments for all people.
Bet.
Oh, today we got some fantastic guests, and we already been shooting this shit a little bit. I got my boy Emeka and Vic, the Village Boyz. What's up, y'all?
Hey, what up?
What's good? What's good, man? It's a privilege to be here, man. I'm excited for
It's
this.
an honor.
Hey, the honor is mine. The honor is mine. If y'all haven't heard, these two fellas are podcasters themselves. They have a podcast called the Village Boyz. I was on it. What was that? Last year? Nope, I think it was
Yeah,
last year.
last
Yeah,
season.
It was a year ago,
last year. So if y'all didn't check that out, check out
One
that
of our
episode.
most listened to episode, by the way.
For
Oh, I
sure.
didn't know that. Okay, bet that.
Yeah.
Bet that. So go check
Yeah.
that out. Go check out their podcast and support the boys. But
Yeah.
for the audience, can y'all give just a quick background? Who's showing up today? Who's showing up? E.
Maggie, you go first.
All right. Man, that's a great question. Hold on. Who's showing up? This is so fascinating because this is the first time I've been on somebody else's podcast.
Ah,
After this is personally, I think Vic has been on some different podcasts, but after starting our own podcast, this is the first podcast I've been on. And it's a great question, man. Who's showing up? I guess this version of Emeka who's showing up is Emeka the husband, Emeka the grown ass man,
yeah.
taking on a lot of responsibilities. Emeka the Emeka that is further along on his healing journey and starting to see the fruits of fruits of his labor, and starting to enjoy the fruits of that labor, not just within myself, but also with my family and my wife. And so, that's the Emeka, a very fulfilled
I
and
like it.
content Emeka is showing up. That's for sure.
Damn, that's beautiful, bro.
Hey,
That's
I appreciate
beautiful.
that, man.
And we're gonna tap into on some of that because you hit on some good stuff. I want to hear that.
For
But
sure.
Vic, let us know.
Yeah, I tried to put Emeka on the spot. That's why I was like, yeah, you go first. But yeah, man. Like Emeka said, it's for me this Victor that's showing up today. I think it's important to understand where I came from and the foundation that was set for me. I'm an only child. Grew up in Lagos, Nigeria, for 12 years. Then moved to Nashville, Tennessee, and I've been here for 15 years. Um, Come from a big extended family, so community is super important to me. My dad has 7 siblings. My mom has 7 as well, and a bunch of cousins, probably like 50 cousins. So community is very, very important to me. My parents are very my parents are very super community oriented, and Nigerian culture in itself is very community oriented. So I would say that's one of the big tenets of my life is creating a space for other people and building friendships, real friendships, not things that are built on frivolous and shaky foundations, real tethering friendships that mean things and showing up for people when it matters and vice versa as well too. So kind of similar to what Emeka says, this part of my life is, I think I'm a couple of years into my like mental health journey and also my healing journey. So I feel like things are starting to click now. So I'm definitely starting to see the investment pay off, but also having the language to better define my experience and the things that I went through, and also the language to also better connect with other people as well. So I think the
Hmm.
biggest thing with struggle and biggest thing with mental health is sometimes you feel like you're alone in certain situations, and speaking about it and having the language to explain your experience also gives you the chance to connect with other people and find safe spaces as well too. So yeah, that's kind of quick
That's
synopsis of me,
beautiful.
my journey, and where I'm at right now. So yeah.
That's beautiful. Let me ask y'all, because I mean, y'all know the journey that I'm on, and the content that I put out, and it's a lot around
Yeah.
mental health. Did that inform your answer there, or was that, would, if anybody else would have asked y'all that, which I've said something similar in the realm of healing? Both of y'all mentioned healing.
Meg, you want to go first, or you want me to go first?
Um, are you saying because we know your
Yeah,
content that we mentioned healing?
yeah.
Um, I would say that was part of it because I
Okay.
because we've had a episode, and in that episode, that was personally one of my favorite episodes, just because like
Hmm.
I got to know your story. Like your story is very powerful. You know what I mean? So and then just seeing your subsequent content after that, I just felt like, you know, it was like an automatic safe space, or like automatic
Ah, that's
space where
dope.
like we like we just gonna get there. We just gonna go
Yeah.
there immediately. You
Facts.
know what I mean? Like
Facts.
we ain't even
That's
gotta
good.
like play around. Like it's just like immediately. Let's just go right there. You know what I mean?
I love that. And you said safe space, and in Mecca, or in Vic, you were talking about community and safe spaces as well. I think y'all built that. Y'all built that with your podcast and your platform as well. I think I felt the same way, because we barely knew each other. We had just
Yeah.
met when I
Yeah.
hopped on y'all's podcast, but it
Yep.
felt like talking to the family.
Yep.
I want to hear a little bit about just the Village Boys and the concept behind it. Like, can y'all tell some of that story and how y'all got together, and how, Village Boys, the podcast, or just the movement came to be?
Yeah, I could start.
Yeah.
I think it was very organic in the sense of like me and Emeka have always had like a really strong friendship, and
Yeah.
we've seen each other at different points in different parts of our progression and growth as well too, right? Emeka was like my first friend when I moved to America, so I was like 12 at the time. First, I landed on a Thursday, then I went to church with my parents on a Sunday, and Emeka was actually the guy that like let me into the door. So from there, we
That's
started
crazy. Yeah.
cultivating a friendship, and it's crazy how God works. And so we started cultivating a friendship, and in that process of having a friendship that has spanned 15 years, you see each other go through different versions and phases of
Yeah.
um, of each other. So our friendships has always grown, and at the central point of our friendship has always been the ability to have really deep, open, vulnerable conversations.
Yeah.
And if you look at how that's transpired into the podcast, it's just been a natural progression. But that, I would say, that was like where the foundation started, and I could let him make it like expound more on like the idea of like how the podcast came about.
Yeah.
Yeah. That was actually really an important part. Um, because when I was starting the podcast, this was 2020. This was I got the idea, a vague idea of it, early 2020, and it was actually going to be a completely different name for different fucking reasons. I ain't gonna get into that, um, but I wanted to have a brand, which is kind of what we're already building. I wanted to have a brand that had, photography aspect, fashion aspect to it,
Mm.
audio aspect to it, things like that. But I wanted it to center around like our our black experience, coming from coming from a different country and living, here, and having like trying to like unravel what our black experience has been.
Hmm.
And so I was like, man, like it would be dope to start a podcast. And like the first person that came to my mind was Vic. And I'm like, obviously that makes sense, right? Like clearly, like like I'm gonna do a podcast with Vic because I've known Vic for a long time. We've had very similar experiences, like growing up in the same church. Like we have a lot of those conversations. and also like Vic, especially at that time, like we would, I used to have like when I was growing in my own like worldview per se, me and Vic used to clash a lot, right? But I will always respect what he said because he always had a sound mind with his points, and he always had like, it was very factual. It was one of those things that even though we clashed, I could still very much like respect where he was coming from because he wasn't just talking out of his ass, right? He was very like, it was very much of a I don't know, like it was, I don't know how to explain it, but I just respected it, right? And I was like, all
Right.
right, cool. We may not always agree, but I know for a fact Vic is always going to come with facts, and he's always going to come with like a strong point of view
That's huge.
that, you know what I mean? Like that you just got to like either respect, and you got to like come with your own real facts to like refute it, or else he's going to like see the holes and shit like that. So I really respected that.
Yo.
And so I was like, yeah, let's talk about it. And on
Mhm.
top of that, that was also the same time that I had started dating my wife, who was Black American. I'm Nigerian. So we also used to have these conversations about like, what does it mean to be Black? Like your Blackness looks different from my Blackness, right? And so that's kind of where that kind of sparked the idea, that kind of added to the idea as well. And then March 2020, we was like, hey, let's just start recording. And we just started recording right when the pandemic hit too. So
Okay, that's
Yeah.
dope, man. I love that. So you talked about some clashes. What's
yeah.
top of mind? What's some of the biggest things y'all done been at each other about?
It's so
Whether
much. We've been, bro. Me and Vic, like we've been going at it since we met. That's the
Yeah.
thing. Like like when we were
like
younger,
true
we used to
brothers though.
go for
Yeah,
real,
it's
for
always been
real.
rooted in like love. Like it was never like
Yeah, yeah,
fuck you, nigga. You know what I mean? It was never on
yeah,
some like
yeah,
combative shit. It was
yeah, yeah,
always like debates and like
yeah,
I don't think that's making sense because I think naturally
yeah,
my personality is like I always tell Megan this. I don't like when people have opinions that they haven't flushed out correctly. So like
yeah,
when somebody just believes something because they just believe it, and I'm like my mind has always worked in like a very inquisitive way, right? So for me, I
Mhm.
try to the things that I latch onto and the things that I speak about confidently. I try to at least do my due diligence. And Emeka is a very intellectually curious person as well too. So I think that led to like Emeka is the type of dude that it'll be like this was like back then it would be like 1 p.m. and he asked me some question about like the universe. So God, I'm like, bro, like I'm working right now. Why are you texting me about this right now? So so there was always a space for like intellectual curiosity. I think the biggest thing was for me, I've always been very, very interested in social science and like Black liberation and things like that. And Emeka was coming into that journey of like starting to understand those things and understand the tenets of like history, social science, why certain things in society play out the way they did. So I
yeah.
think because of that, he was asking a lot of questions and having and trying to understand his beliefs a lot more. So that led to more combative conversations about economics, led to more combative conversations about race, how those
History.
things,
Yeah.
history, how those things all blend together, and kind of having a playbook on how to decipher what was actual systemic problems and what was just fluff. You know.
Yeah.
That's beautiful. You know what I
Yeah.
really appreciate about that is that like we're three black men with three very different experiences right here. And what you
Hmm.
just said was to have combative conversations around some very deep topics, some very
Hmm.
deep social political topics that, outside looking in, I think a very ignorant and narrow mindset would say black people think this, right?
Yeah.
And that's just not true, right? Like we
Yeah.
have different opinions even within just these three people right here sitting right here.
Hmm.
So I really appreciate that. And I think that's one of the things that drew me to y'all was the uh intellectual curiosity, as you put it, Vic. Like you guys ask great questions, you guys think very deeply, and I can see it in your answers, just like how you are thinking throughout what you're talking about, which I really
Hmm.
appreciate. But I still want to know, like, what is one thing y'all fought about? Like, I want to know.
So one thing that we fought about was, I remember this one specific. Wait, what was one specific thing? We would fight about.
I have one
Um,
on top of my head.
what you
Yeah.
thinking?
So for me, I think one of the biggest one was like when Emeka was in the finance space, he was like his views were very
Mm,
capitalistic in terms
yeah,
of
yeah, yeah,
like
Mm,
his worldview was shaped around this perspective of like
I like this.
like just work hard. You know what I mean? Like you just
Yeah,
work hard.
yeah.
Like
It's a
or
good. It's actually a really good one. Yeah,
you got to go get it. So for
yeah,
me, like I was always trying to like explain that there's so many other different variables that go into that, but
right.
also how sometimes ultra capitalistic ideas actually are built on exploitation as well too.
Right.
Mm,
So we had a lot of conversations about that and like understanding each other's perspective. That's one thing off the top of my head. I'm sure
Yeah.
he has other stuff.
That's no. That's actually a great point. Because when I was in finance, that was when I was like at my most. Yeah, I was like on like I was hustle. Like I was on my like,
yeah.
man, we gotta hustle. Like
Right.
I was coming from the mindset which I've noticed like a lot of Nigerians or a lot of Black immigrants who moved here, who immigrated here have, which is I moved to this country, I'm doing well.
Mm-hmm.
Why can't
Mm-hmm.
you, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so it's an incomplete thought, and it's a
Right.
very inconsiderate thought, because if it wasn't for the work that Black Americans did, African Americans did, we wouldn't really be able to be here.
Facts.
You know what I'm saying? Like taking
Facts.
these opportunities. That makes sense.
No, it makes total
So
sense.
yeah, so it was one of those things where like I couldn't really see that back then. And then it wasn't really until like I lost my immigration status to where I
Mm,
really realized that like how important institutions are
wow.
in America, right? In these countries, right? Because yeah, you can hustle hard, you can do all these things, but you know, if I don't have the capacity to actually like bring in revenue or to be able to like, drive, down the street and not be afraid to get caught, or being able to go to a job and apply to it, you
Mm.
know what I'm saying, and being able to get money from it without it being under the table, you know what I
Mm-hmm.
mean? Like I had to have an immigration status to do that. So
Right.
my point of saying is that I couldn't really hustle the way I thought I should, because I didn't have access to
Wow.
these economic institutions. So that really put it a lot into perspective. That it put that bootstrap analogy shit, like it
Yeah.
that shit is like, it's very 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 like
Yeah.
short sighted, because institutions play a big role in our well-being, and in how we make money and things like
Mm-hmm.
that. And so yeah, it was just a lot of, and then conversations with Vic, like when I lost my immigration status and I couldn't really work, like I was thinking about the conversations me and Vic had, was like, damn, like he's right. Like it don't
Mm.
matter how much like I wake up in the morning and do all these different things, man. At the end of the day, if I make money in this country, I got to pay taxes. And if I avoid these taxes, I'm getting in trouble. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
So like, I gotta. But if I had my immigration status, I wouldn't really have to worry about that shit. Does that make sense?
Wow. That makes yeah.
So
Damn.
yeah, so that was one of the biggest things that we fought about, and then life humbled
That's
me.
yeah. No, that's good because I can resonate on both sides
Yep.
because I too like was trained in economics, accounting, finance,
Mm-hmm.
and I think even before that though, growing up, I was very much an exception in these places that I was in and the
Right.
opportunities that I was being presented. And so in my young naive mind, it was like, why can't you do it too? Right. I went
Right.
to school, I focused, I did this, but honestly, like in like life humbling me, but also bringing, just this awareness that there's so many other factors, so many other challenges in a person's life that prevent them from doing that.
Mm-hmm.
I could show up to school and have a clear mind because of the weekend that I had with my grandparents, whereas this kid was running around, scared for his life, probably
Mm-hmm.
doing some things that he didn't want to be doing, and
Yeah.
all types of stuff that prevented how they showed up to school, that then affected whatever else happened in their life. But
Right.
I think I could resonate with where you were during that time in your life, and the immigration status. I can't though, right? Like I
Mm-hmm.
was born here. I have never even had to fathom what what losing my immigration status. I don't even know. Like I know what that means, but can you talk about what that means? What was your status? How'd you get that status, and then
Yeah.
how do you lose it?
So I came in as a student. So my mom was a diplomat. So um, she finessed a lot of shit for me. Essentially, she
That's the
finessed
most
a lot of
Nigerian answer of all time.
shit. Yeah, she finessed a lot of shit for me. So I came in as a student on something called an F1 visa.
Okay.
And then when I graduated in 2015, my visa runs out because at that point I graduated college. I'm done with school. Unless I reapplied, I wasn't going to get that visa back. So I was on a student visa. But then right before I graduated, my mom changed it to a diplomatic visa.
Okay.
So I was on something called an A2 visa. So it's actually like a fun time in my life because technically speaking, on a diplomatic visa, I couldn't get in trouble for shit.
Wow.
Yeah, I couldn't. Like even if I got arrested, like at least that's what I read like on the immigration website
Okay.
was unless like even if I got in trouble, I got charged with shit.
Because
Like
you're not underneath the jurisdiction of like the U.S. Like
right, I was part of sovereign land, which
Yeah.
is part of the Nigerian embassy and shit like that.
Yeah.
To my understanding. But if I left the country and came back, and if I got in trouble here and I left the country and came back, then I couldn't come back in, right?
Okay.
But as long as I had something called like diplomatic immunity, which is funny because when Drake came out with that song, I was playing that song like, back to back. but so I lost that status in 2017. So what that means is, man, when you lose your status, bro, like you can't really work, you can't get your driver's license, you can't really apply to go to school, you can't do shit, bro.
Damn.
Like, you're fucked essentially. So unless like
So it's just like go back home. It's basically what it's forcing you to do.
yeah. So what's crazy was 2020. I was actually like on my way back home. Like at the end of 2020, I was like, yeah, I'm done ducking and dodging police. You know what I'm saying? I'm done, like, you know what I'm saying, like trying to find work to do.
And duck and dodging the police as a human, not as a person who's committed a crime or anything like that. You're just existing.
Yeah, because like I'm not trying to, because my license was expired since 2016. Like I was driving on an expired license. I can say that now because my status has changed. Like I'm not gonna get in trouble for it. But
yeah.
And yeah, so like, because if I got caught, which I did get caught a few times, I had the risk of getting deported. Thankfully, I had great lawyers who, again, finessed some shit for me. But
that's what lawyers do.
I'm telling you, bro. So, and I'll be, man, to be real, bro, like there's been so many times that I don't know how I got out of this shit outside of God. Like there's so many times to where like I probably should have been deported. But because of God, he kind of saw me through a lot of that stuff. And so, yeah, man. But I as I was going through therapy for it, one of my therapists, because I was going through something called a emotional focus therapy, which is a different type of therapy. Which like, and I actually might go back to it, but essentially, she would force you to like she wouldn't. It wasn't really talk. It was really more so like describing how you feel. And having therapy through that. And so that I needed that because at that time I was very distant from my emotions. I couldn't recognize my emotions, right? So meaning that I could only recognize being angry, or being, just indifferent.
Okay.
But outside of that, I couldn't really recognize a lot, right? And so I didn't have like a lot of emotional dynamism or variability. So I couldn't really experience like the fullness of life. So I was like, you know what? Let me see if I can go through this type of therapy to help expand my understanding of my emotions. And so through that, we were able to determine that like my immigration status, like me being in that space where like I lost my status and I'm like trying to hustle every day to like make enough money so I can like apply to get this visa or that. It forced me to like operate within a box, right? And so I shrunk myself down to be able to fit into this box, which is I couldn't do much outside of this box, which is I can't go to certain places because if something pops off and the police come and they ask me for my shit, you know what I'm saying? Like I can't work, I can't go invest in this thing because I need to be a permanent resident at the lowest to be able to invest in certain things to make my money grow and to do, you know what I'm saying? So like, or I couldn't, thankfully I could open up bank accounts, but I couldn't do much more from that. You know what I'm saying? So like, it just forced me to like shrink down so small, and like it caused a lot of like just mental stress and just a lot of stress, a lot of heaviness, to where like I was constantly waking up and operating in fear every day. Fear of like that. I used to get like just mad random anxiety feeling of like, man, what if ISIS comes in this door right now and just be like, hey, we're looking for
Time to go.
Swear to God, I used to think about that shit constantly, bro. You know what I'm
Wow.
saying? Like, you just think about just like, man, like I know, and like not being able to really invest in friendships here, like being able to invest in shit here, because in my mind, I thought I had like an expiration date in this country, because I always thought like, damn, like I might have to leave, so I couldn't really make friends the way I really wanted to. I couldn't really, you know what I'm saying, like do the shit I really wanted to do, because I'm like, damn, like what if I gotta go? You know what I mean? Like, what's the point? I'm gonna lose this shit anyway. So it was very, very stressful, very, very stressful. But I learned how to just like internalize all of that and just like have a poker face and just like keep moving. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So going through therapy like helped like unpack a lot of that shit, thankfully, and my wife helped a lot too.
Good.
So but yeah, that's kind of how that's what the experience was like, man.
I wanted to stick on that as well too, because I think from like a friendship perspective as well too, I think like having a friend that's going through that is such a weird thing as well, because like one, you can't speak about it to other people because like
Yeah.
that could actually tarnish
Yeah.
tarnish them, but also like could actually put them in danger of getting deported as well too, right? So creating that sacred space between both of y'all, but also like getting a text like, yo, I just got pulled over, and like, damn, like he about to be gone type, you know what I mean?
Right.
So so
Yeah.
but also Mecca made some great points on his rant about like like having the language to understand what he was feeling, and also like how that helped him work through that, but also how that also helps him connect to other people as well. And for me, the reason, like just to tie it all back to like the social science stuff and everything we talked about on the front end, the reason why I was very interested in a lot of these things about social science and politics and all that is because I grew up in spaces where like a lot of people were not they were not legally supposed to be here, right? So I went to Wright Middle School, I went to Overton. There's a bunch of people that are affected by policies where they can't get the green cards and different things like that. So growing up with that, that was like the norm, right? So like for me, you get to actually understand like, oh, like why did your family actually cross the border? What was that process like how do you even like exist in this space without having any way to actually get like money like in like a formal way? So a lot of those things just made me very, very curious, right? It was like, okay, like how do I understand these policies more? How do I understand these people's experiences more? And goes back to the whole thing about community. I think a lot of times we look at the world from like a very subjective perspective, right? Like especially when you're younger, because like life hasn't smacked you enough to for you to understand that like you're one tragedy away from being in the lowest point. You know what I mean? So growing up in just community, like we look at things from a very subjective perspective, and we think the objective is like totally colored by our subjective experience. And you made a great point about like in the space you were in, right? You were exceptional, and you're a brilliant mind as well too, right? But you were like, why isn't everybody else just working as hard as me? And like, if I could do it, they could do it. And that reasoning is good in some instances, right? Because it puts the agency on you to work harder. But also, like Emeka said, it's very incomplete, because I think a lot of times we do ourselves a disservice of judging like a sample size by the outliers that make it out. It's just not. It's not a very logical thing to look at a big sample size, but like, oh, like 3 of these people made it out. How come the thousands of other people that didn't make it out? It's that like that is not you're doing that's a disservice to your humanity in reality, because like it's not like in that space you have to look at the system like, okay, why are these so many people failing, and then you get your like theories and everything from that. But in reality, the way a lot of people look at politics and policy, they see 3 people that made it out, and instead of like actually like looking at the sample size and like the system that keeps the other people there, they're like, well, nah, this is just a disgrace to these other people that didn't make it out. And if you look at
Exactly.
a capitalistic society, it does not work without somebody being at the bottom. Like, so a
Absolutely.
lot of these things are not
Absolutely.
very congruent. Like, they just don't add up. So for me, it was a lot of things weren't adding up. And I think the older you get, the more you experience different perspectives, the more you get in connection to other people that are going through different things.
Mm,
It expands your empathy. That's really what it's rooted in, right? Like
right.
you have more
Yeah,
empathy.
for sure.
You
Right.
understand somebody else's experience. You understand that also because something happened for you, that doesn't necessarily mean they're having the same experience. And also another thing that I've noticed with my experience, I was just actually thinking about it today. It's like I've had so many God moments that got me to where I'm at.
Mm,
It's not like reductionist in terms of like me saying that I haven't worked hard. I've worked very, very hard. And I think a
mhm,
lot of times people can't like reconcile that together. Like, yes, you've worked really hard. And this is not to take away from your hard work and take away from your journey and take away from all the great things you've done. But we have to talk about it from not a parochial perspective, but in totality. It's like
Yeah.
I've had so many God moments that got me here. Like my parents won the Visa lottery. Like that's chance, that's God or
yeah.
whatever, right? Like I would be in the same scenario with a lot of people in Nigeria where like they don't have the resources to make it. So understanding, looking at your journey in totality will also show you that like yes, I've worked hard, but also I've had a couple breaks that like
True. True.
that was not
True.
due to my doing at all. So
Yeah.
that's the
Absolutely.
biggest thing that I wanted to say.
Yeah, no, that's dope, man. I appreciate that. And you said something earlier, like the older you get, the more, people you meet, the more experiences and cultures you get exposed to and things like that. I think for people who seek it, right? Not everyone, right? So if
Yeah.
you grow
That's a
up
good
in a
point.
in an environment where it is like I'm only going to be surrounded by people who are just like me and I don't even want to think about anybody else, then you get even deeper ingrained in whatever your way of thinking is, and it doesn't lead to empathy. It leads to more of that division and
Mhm.
hurt. So um I appreciate that that's your mindset in the world, and I hope that more people foster a similar mindset. But you mentioned a couple things that I want to hit on, because you one with the schools that you went to. I was actually, for high school, I was zoned for Overton. And for those who don't know Nashville, like Overton it's a population, a very diverse population, right? I think Nashville has the greatest Kurdish population outside of Kurdistan.
Mm.
I mean, Nigerian, we got Egyptian, like Hispanic. Oh yeah, like so many different types of people. And I remember, because you've mentioned God and faith and church, and I'm assuming Christianity for both of you.
Yeah.
Yes. But I'm like Christianity, but I also don't like try to shit on other people's how they get to God or how they get to the
Yeah.
universe. Whatever.
Okay. So during my upbringing, I was raised Christian, and one of the things, and I think it was around, honestly, I think it was around 9/11, and the anti-Muslim and the fear around just different cultures. And I heard so much shit being talked about my friend Araz, or my friend over here, Muhammad, or whatever. And it's like, how in the world are we lumping a whole religion
Mm.
or a whole group of people in this one box and saying that they're bad because of the act of a small population? Going back to what you're saying
Yeah.
about the population size, for you, because I want to dive a little bit deeper into this, but like reconciling your belief in Christianity, how do you see that? How do you do that? Because I'm just trying to learn, honestly, because I've been there where like super Christian, and then it's been very hard for me to reconcile that and really truly understand, because it felt so hurtful, intolerant, and judgmental for me.
For sure.
Mm.
Yeah, for sure. I think that's an ongoing battle, to be completely honest.
Mm,
I grew up in like the church. My mom is a deaconess. My dad is a deacon. So from since I could walk, we've been going to church Wednesdays, Sundays, all that. My parents preach all these different things, right? And for me, like I said, I've always been an intellectually curious person. I've always been an inquisitive person. And I've just been very observant. And I noticed a lot of like the most hateful people that I encountered were from the church. Like there
mm,
was just a lot of things where the root of Christianity wasn't being taught. It was just like a lot of things that people were like it became rooted on legalism rather than what God actually was saying. And it became
Yes,
rooted
that's
in
a good
this
word.
thing where it was rather used as a tool to be judgmental and also used as a tool to ostracize others than it was to bring people to salvation. So I just noticed how toxic that was, and that led me to a space of like, let me explore my own belief system. Like, let me move away from my parents. Let me not do this. It's like this checkpoints that I got to get to heaven. You know what I mean? So
Hmm.
I think for that led me to just like honestly just exploring different religions, exploring different types of thinking, exploring conversations with people that didn't even believe in God, agnostic, atheist, or whatever. So I noticed that a lot of belief was rooted in the same things, right? Like a lot of those things were
Facts.
rooted in the same things, and it was just humans like to. Whenever you give humans a very powerful thing like religion, they will always use it to divide and try to conquer with it, right? So for me, it was like I started to look at it from the sense of like just because somebody misuses something doesn't necessarily mean that it's inherently evil or it's you can't be used productively. So for me, I started to foster more of like a relationship with God, but also not from the lens of like I'm right, I'm wrong, you're going to hell. It's like, man, look, this works for me. This is what
Hmm.
gives me agency to
Yes.
be the best person I could be. This is what gives me agency to create the most community and most love and operate in the world that at the best of my capacity. Whatever works for you,
Yeah.
I want to
Me
hear
too.
more about it, and I want to see how that works for you. And like, let's have beautiful conversations about that, and let's create space for each other. And I
Yeah.
think a lot of that was rooted growing up as well. My mom's best friend was Muslim,
Hmm.
so we used to go over to their house for like they have Eid after they do like the fasting. So we'll go over to their house for Eid. They call it Salah in Nigeria. We'll all eat and we just kind of share love. And I just noticed how powerful those spaces were, where we were just like engaging with each other's humanity without the labeling of like I'm Christian, you're Muslim, and all these different things. Then going to Overton, a lot of my friends on the soccer team were from Kurdistan, right?
Hmm.
So I noticed a lot of things I was seeing in the media with how hurtful it was to them, but also how untrue it was, right? Propaganda is a very powerful thing, but it's not powerful when you actually have real contact with humans that are different from you, right?
Right.
Because you see the facade, right? So a lot of my closest friends were Muslim. A lot of my closest friends were from Kurdistan and Iraq, and they would take me to their house and they would feed me. Their parents would let me play with their kids, and they were super welcoming. So I think that also created an added layer of like, man, like these people also have the same belief that they're praying to their God, right? And they've seen signs and wonders in their life where they're like, wow, that's a miracle only from God. Who am I to be like, nah, that's fake, fam. Like that didn't happen. You
Yeah.
know what I'm trying to say?
Right.
So it was just like not leading with ego. Like a lot of times people
Yeah.
want to lead with ego. It's like my experience is right, you're wrong. It's just not leading with ego, creating a space for each other. I think that's what humanity should be.
Yes.
I don't, and I think a lot of times, as that's transformed from religion to dividing people from a social place, but also from like a political place, a lot of people want to legislate their beliefs. And
Hmm.
for me, the way I've always looked at politics, well, not always, the way I look at politics is like my job isn't to legislate my belief system into the world. My
Hmm.
job is to create enough space for everybody's different belief
Views.
systems. And if as long as they're not hurting somebody, right? Like as long as you're not hurting nobody, you're not bothering me with yours. I think it's beautiful for
Yeah.
humans to operate it like that because it just gets very weird. Like it gets very toxic and it gets really hard to adjudicate what's right and wrong. When I'm saying in my religion, this is correct, in your religion, that's not correct. And we're supposed to live in a multicultural space like America. Like, why should your belief system take subjugate mine? So
Hmm.
that's kind of, I know that's a long rant, but that's
No,
kind of
it's
the
a
way,
beautiful. That's a beautiful
yeah, that's
answer.
kind of
And
the way that's evolved. And that's how I reconcile it. And it's an ongoing struggle because you see it in the world today. There's a lot of things that Christians do that I'm not really proud of. But I think for me, when I boil it down, I look at it from like a very personal relationship. I don't think this is like some with the New England Patriots. I got to be banging for them. Nah, like
Yeah,
I
yeah.
talk to God every day. I wake up and I pray
yeah,
and I
it's
sin
beautiful.
and I make mistakes and do different things just like everybody else. But it's a very sacred space for me. And
Yeah.
like something might work for me. Like my relationship with God is different from Emeka's relationship with God. We still believe in Jesus or whatever, but it's not my job to be like Emeka. Like, I think this doesn't work for you because we're different human beings, right?
Right.
Emeka
Right.
might find God better in praying in nature. I might find God better praying in my room. I might
Hmm.
find God better by not even reading the Bible. I might just want to hear it audioly. So you got to create space for
Right.
difference, and you got to create space for nuance with things as complex as religion. And
Mm-hmm.
I love what you said of what works for me may not work for you and vice versa. And but that you're curious to learn more. How does that work for you? Why does that work for you? I think that is the piece that I feel is missing often. It's not it's automatic. And for me, this is my experience, right? I feel this literally just happened on the plane. This lady was I don't know how we got on religion, but she was trying to convert me on this 1 hour flight from Charlotte. And I'm like, what is going on? And I ended the conversation with like, I love that that works for you and this works for me. And I respect your views. And I hope that one day you can respect mine. And that's just like where I was at with it. But
Yeah.
I love how you put that, Vic. E, you wanna comment on that or
Yeah, I would say I've come to the same place that Vic is in a different way, right? In different experiences to where um there was a point where I was just like being very rebellious about everything that I was brought up on for whatever reason. I
why
think
can
at that
I
point,
can see that in your face. Like I can
man.
just see that.
I think there was a point where I was like very hurt by my family that I was just like, man, fuck every one of y'all. Like I'm doing
Mm,
the complete opposite of everything that you told me.
mm,
But that was me operating from hurt, and it kind of pushed me like away from Christianity, and that's when I got into um like new age religion. I started getting a little bit into Buddhism, Taoism. um I was learning a little bit about shamanism.
mm-hmm.
I was like, I think Vic probably remember at that point, I was like into a lot of different shit. I started doing like self hypnosis. Like I was just like trying to, I think because I was also, at the time, I was very lonely, and I was
Mm,
very empty, and I was trying to find a God.
mm,
You know what I mean? I was just very desperate. Um, this was a very desperate time in my life, but I would say in the moment of me trying to find those things, I realized the same thing that Vic realized, is that a lot of religions are based on very, very, very similar principles.
mm-hmm.
And so that alone is what stopped my centrality in a way, or like my religious superiority, and thinking that Christianity is above every other religion. Just because I was like, man, like they're all based on a very, very similar principle. There's just certain legalistic things that are different, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I started looking into like Judaism, and how that's different from Christianity, how Christianity came from Judaism and things like that. And just by chance, in the fact that I grew up in a Christian household, I was Christian.
Right.
If not, I could
Right.
have been a completely different religion,
Right.
right? I could have been worshiping a completely different type of God. And at that point, then what? Right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, does that make sense?
Right.
Um, so, and then I started researching, a little bit more about Christianity, and just like seeing in history just how people have used Christianity. I think what really hit me the most was like when I saw how the colonizers in Africa, in certain parts of Africa, use religion to coerce and to like colonize us. I was just like, that hit me. I ain't gonna lie, that really
Mm-hmm.
hit me. And that was probably when I started wrestling with God, and just like being very forthcoming with my conversations with God, of like, I don't like the fact that I say I'm a Christian and this is part of Christian history.
Mm-hmm.
Like there was something about that really just like bothered me. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
To the point where like I was like, man, do I want to say I'm Christian? Does that make sense? Like, do I want to say,
Yeah.
do I want to claim this religion? Do I just want to say I'm spiritual, things like that? But me and one of my good friends, Jay West, like we've had a lot of these conversations where like me and him, like he's one of the people where like when it came to religion and Christianity, we would like,
Mm-hmm.
I would say we debated a lot, because I'll ask him very, very deep questions that like I couldn't ask other people, because like because I remember there's one time I asked one of our aunties in the church, I was like, yo, why can't we question? Like, can I question God? You know what I mean? And I remember distinctively, like, I didn't know who to turn to ask that question to, because I always thought that most people would be like, man, what do you mean question God? Like, who are you to question God, right? And I think she was the first person to say, like, yo, like, it's actually a good thing to question God.
Wow.
You know, like, you should question God. And then me and one of my Jay West, like, we used to like go at it and like debate and like ask these very deep questions that, you know, are like you don't really hear in church, right? Like, why is it that, you know, back then Christianity was one of the main religions that enslaved people, right? Like, I don't know who to turn in the church to ask that question. at least the church that we went to,
Right.
you know what I'm saying?
Right.
Like,
Knowledge to answer that for you too.
you say what?
They don't even have the knowledge to
That's
answer
what I
that
was
for
gonna
you.
say. A lot of people won't even know how.
Exactly, because from my assumption, they would just revert back to, I don't even know. They would just go back to something in the gospel or something about Nigerian cultures, like, what, like, don't be disrespectful to the religion or whatever.
Man
right?
is flawed, not the religion.
Yeah, exactly,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Exactly, man is flawed, not the religion. And so, me and him used to go at it. He was like, hey, yo, like, how, like, I used to tell him, I was like, yo, how can I say I'm Christian when this same religion has colonized our people? How can I reconcile that? And me and him used to have great conversations about that, right? So he's been a great person, I would say, in my own personal journey, that has helped me like kind of reconcile like my own relationship with Christianity. And also,
Is there an answer to that question? How do you reconcile?
How do I say I'm Christian when the same religion has colonized our people or enslaved our people? I think it goes a lot back to what Vic said, is that, you know, if you look at the Bible in general, like, the entire Bible is filled with flawed people. It, like, you know, there's also the part of the conversation that me and Jay West had, was like, if you look at the first Testament, like, it's filled with people like marrying multiple wives, killing people. You know what I mean? Like David killing somebody, you know, in the army just to marry, you know, his wife. Solomon having 700 wives. You know what I'm saying? Like 300 concubines. People, you know, Jacob. Um, Deceiving his father to get, you know, his brother's inheritance, things like that. It's filled with a lot of that stuff. But I think what me and him kind of got down to was, like, if you look at the essence of the Bible, is that God stayed the same through it all, right? And so I started looking at it from the perspective of, you know, kind of like what Vic said, like, and what you said, like, we're just flawed as human beings, right? Like, the Bible's filled with flawed people. We're just flawed as human beings, and we will never ever be as perfect. We'll never be perfect. You know what I mean? So therefore, if we're practicing Christianity, there's no way that we'll ever see a perfect religion being practiced ever in our lifetime. And so I just had to like reconcile that same thing with our parents, right? Our parents may love us, but like, they're also flawed people. They also do things that, you know, are not, that we look back now and just like, bro, why did you do that? You know what I mean? That did not make sense. That wasn't fair. That wasn't good, X, Y, and Z, but they had their reasons, right?
Yeah.
And so I just had to look at it from that perspective, is they're still my parent. Like, at the end of the day, there was still a love, you know what I mean, that they have for me. And so I just had to realize that, like, man, like, we're flawed human beings, but that doesn't stop God's love for us. And so I just had to like accept that that's what happened, that that's what people did with the power that God gave them. However, that should not taint the entirety of such a beautiful religion and such a beautiful relationship that you can build with God, and the will that God has for us. It shouldn't
That's so
take that.
beautiful. Wow.
And so yeah, that's been my reconciliation with that, though.
I love
It's
it.
been a journey, though. I ain't gonna lie.
Yeah.
It's been a journey.
I
I
love
think
it.
also, like, for me, and that's not to cut you off, but like,
You good.
for me, it's being okay with certain things I'm just not gonna have answers for. Like,
Yeah,
being very comfortable with that. Like, I'm not gonna have answers for
that's a
all
good
the
point.
different thing.
Yeah,
It's like if you look at religion and you look at it from like and this is one thing that in my life that's not very congruent. Well, not one thing. There's other things, right? Like, I'm flawed. I'm human, but there's a little bit of logic that you have to drop with religion, like and faith in
Yeah,
general, right?
yeah, for sure, for
Or
sure.
else it won't be faith. You know what I'm trying
Yeah,
to say? Like you have
Yeah.
to kind of take a little bit of a blind jump.
yeah,
And for me, that likes to like look at things from like a very well thought out, like let's break things down. Why is this the way it is? That was one thing that was always weird because it's like, well, like certain things I'm just not going to have the answer to. But also that
mhm.
also created more space and more conversations with people that didn't believe with God at all. Because they're like, now I'm like, I see why you don't believe in God. Like
Exactly.
a
Yeah,
lot of this shit don't make no sense. You know what I'm
it
trying to
don't
say?
make sense at all. Yeah,
So so for me, it's like being okay with that, but also what Emeka said about being flawed is like looking at myself as like me as an entity.
hmm,
Also, it's made me understand this a lot better, right? I think I show up in the world as a pretty good person, right? But there's times where I think I have the best intentions and I've still done bad shit. You know what I'm
yeah,
trying to say? And
Yeah.
there's some times where I'm just in a bad day and I just do bad shit. You know what I'm trying to say?
Right.
Because
yeah,
it's flawed, we're human. We go from different emotions. We like, you know what I mean? There's a
hmm,
different range of things that happen in our different experience, right? Somebody
yeah,
might I might have an argument with my girlfriend or my wife that day, and like I
yeah,
see somebody, a kid on the street that I could help, and I'm like, man, fuck that nigga. I'm not trying to help. So so
yeah,
understanding that like I am flawed, very very flawed, and just because like I try to show up in the world as a good person,
yeah,
I still make mistakes, and I'm gonna make a lot more. And understand like I got to give myself grace as well
Mm-hmm.
too. So
yeah,
Facts.
that creates a more space for me to to be okay with some of those things because I know
hmm,
like
Yeah.
personally I can't I'm not perfect, but also a beautiful thing about like God and Jesus or whatever is like there's an understanding that he knows that you're gonna fail, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
hmm,
we're like if we're this world is filled with sin and this world is filled with affliction and all and
yeah,
suffering and all these different things, right? So understanding that like I don't have to show up in this world as this perfect thing. It's
yeah,
like every other relationship, right? Like the way I cultivate a relationship with Reggie, the way I cultivate a relationship with Emeka is like I spend time with them, I check up on them,
hmm,
different things like that, making
hmm,
sure I cultivate that relationship. And even though with friendships too, like we could have a healthy relationship, but there's still times that I do something that irritates Emeka. There's still time I do
hmm,
something that irritates Reggie. So just understanding the nuance of the human experience is very flawed, and a lot of it doesn't
yeah,
make sense. And a lot of it is filled with that. Will for me, it's created a space to be okay with not having all the answers as well, but
yeah,
also engaging in more conversations with people that like don't believe in God and be like, yeah, I can see why, bro. Like, so
yeah, for
you read the
sure.
Bible, you see some of this shit contradicts. You read the Quran, some of it contradicts, and all these
Yeah,
different things. So yeah, that's been my
That's
experience
dope.
with it, and
yeah,
not feeling
and
like I have to earn God's love. That's been the biggest one for me
mm,
because I think a lot of times this is one thing I've kind of noticed. I was talking to my therapist about this like about 2 months ago. A lot of times, our experience with God is very, very, very. A lot of times, it mirrors our relationships with our parents. Right?
yeah,
Mm-hmm.
Grew up in a Nigerian household. A lot of the ways you like get love is by earning it. Right? You
hmm,
get good grades.
hmm,
You get a really good job. You become a doctor. I started to see how
hmm,
that was slipping into my relationship with God, where it was like, man, like I did something bad today, man. I don't feel like praying. Not because like I feel like God is looking at me wrong. It's just like I have so much shame. You
Yeah.
know what I mean? So
Yeah.
for me, it's understanding that like I don't have to show up as this perfect entity to God.
yes,
I just have to be myself, but
so,
also giving myself
yeah,
grace. But understand that God will give you grace if you show up
yeah,
like that.
yeah.
That's
Yeah.
been
That's
the
a great
biggest thing
point.
that's transformed my relationship.
That's a
And
beautiful segue. Go ahead, Mecca,
yeah, I
but
just
I
want to
want
add
to.
one more thing to that. And when Vic was talking, it reminded me because we talked about like flawed human beings.
Mm-hmm.
Another thing that helped me reconcile the earlier point was recognizing uh, like um, the abuse of power and just how power manifests in us as human beings, right? In our
Yeah.
pursuit of power, right? And so the more I've been studying politics or like learning more about politics, I've been able to recognize um, like how absolute power absolutely corrupts, right? And how like what Vic
Mm.
said in the beginning that like when you give humans like something as powerful as religion, um, they're gonna corrupt that,
Mm.
right? They're gonna it's gonna corrupt them at some point. And so as I've been learning more about power and politics and things like that, I've also recognized that in history when people use religion to coerce to coerce like a polity or something like that, is more so about ego and power versus the actual religion itself. The religion was just a tool to be able to get what they wanted, and so that speaks more to that like that person's
Yeah.
uh, desire for power and the way that they used power versus the religion itself. Does that make sense? So being able to separate the two also kind of like
Yeah.
helped out. And so when Vic was talking about that, kind of like reminded me
Yeah.
of that point of, as far as like how flawed we are as human beings.
Dropping bars, like straight bars, both of y'all. Like I am again, if you haven't listened to the Village Boys podcast, like go ahead and check that out, right? So I had no intention on talking about religion. I didn't know what we were going to talk about, honestly.
Yeah.
And I'm so glad that we have, because like I said, like I was on an hour flight and I was very uncomfortable the entire time. We've been talking for about an hour, and this has been so refreshing to just be here and talk to y'all because of the openness and how just engaging you guys are. But Vic, you said something earlier that I really want to kind of pivot towards, is our relationship with God, and how that how that models or mimics, parallels our relationship with our parents, and how like there's this very performative type of way in from your experience of having to uh prove to them to get love by being a high achiever or whatever it may be. And there was this quote that I just saw the other day. It said, "Perfectionism is the response of having to work for love." Right? If you think
Yeah.
about like growing up, you've been told that like,
Sheesh.
or you haven't even. Yeah, I'll send it
Sheesh.
to both of y'all. And I'm gonna shout it out.
Sheesh.
It's the holistic psychologist. So all her
I
books
love
are
her.
fantastic. Yeah, fantastic. But yeah, perfectionism is the response of anyone who's had to work to be loved. And man, growing up, I had perfectionist tendencies. I'm a recovering perfectionist now. And you talked about it in your family. I want to hear kind of those relationships with parents or whomever the guardian was around the time you were growing up, that really created the personality, the people that you are, the wisdom that you both possess. Like, what was those relationships like? Because we talked about healing. Healing from what? What were some of the things you were healing from?
Man, whew, that's a loaded question.
It
Um,
is, man.
the thing is, for me, so my dad moved to America when I was 12, like when I was born. He won the visa lottery, moved right when I was born. He would come back like every year or so, but so my mom raised me. But I grew up in like a 3 bedroom house with 12 people living in it.
Mm,
So I had a bunch of people in my house.
mm,
People that were actually blood related, like cousins, uncles, and people that were not. That were just like my mom, like would shelter them and like give them a place to eat and sleep and all that, right? From church and all these different things. So in that space, you're just exposed to a lot of different things because a lot of them were at different ages, right? Like it was my mom, then a lot of young adults and different things in the house. The biggest one is in Nigerian culture, the way our relationships are set up are a lot different than the way they are here. There's a hierarchy to things. It's like I'm your parent. You don't get to question me about anything. You don't get to. We don't get to bargain or like have a conversation about things. Like
No
it's
negotiation, bro.
there's no negotiation, right? It's like, yo, you got to go to sleep at 8 p.m. And I'm like, why? Like, why? And just, as a child, you're inquisitive, right? Like, you're very inquisitive. And especially, like, I'm a very inquisitive person naturally. There weren't a lot of answers. It was just like, because I'm your parent. Like,
Mm-hmm.
and it would always result into them, like, labeling me as being disrespectful, which
mhm,
was very hurtful at that time because I'm like, I'm really just trying to understand. You know what I'm trying to say? And that led to like a lot of rebellion, like Emeka talked about with his relationship with religion. It led to a lot of rebellion and stubbornness as well because it's like you want to be understood, but you feel like you're not being understood. You want to have certain conversations that are not happening. So you just kind of like you kind of build a shell of protection around you, and you're like, man, like screw it. You know what I'm trying to say? So the way the hierarchy of things are set up there is like it was not very like, and not to say my parents and my like guardians and people around me didn't give me love. There was a lot of love, but it was just different. Like the way, like, and I don't want to speak for everybody. I think a lot of the ways that immigrant cultures show love is by like doing things for you, right? So
Yeah, for
my
sure.
mom would cook for us. My mom would buy me things. They would do all these different things. It was not like from the sense of like building a relationship with like conversations, like, oh, like, why do you want to pursue this? Why do you want to do that? Like, what? It was more like, I'm just going to do this things because I'm your mother and I love you, rather than explaining to you why it's happening. So, um, a lot of the healing has come from that, right? It's like growing up, it was like a lot of comparison. There was like comparison Olympics. Why aren't you like that child, right? Like, let's say I got a bad grade in school. They would come and like, let's say I'm like ninth place, right? In the way it's primary school, elementary school, whatever, right? The way in Nigeria it is, they will rank the students. Like, I don't know if they still do that, but they will rank the students. They'll rank your results, right?
Mm.
So it'd
That's
be like
that
30.
day. That day is either one of your best days or a very embarrassing day
Oh my
because
God, I used to
everybody's gonna see your shit.
regret it.
Wow.
So, so they will rank everybody, right? So like, imagine being like 40 people. Imagine being 40th, right? Shit like that. Like, so there was a lot of direct, like, there was a lot of comparison going on, right? And like they say,
Yeah,
comparison is the thief of joy, right? So it leads you into this very performative space where a lot of your identity is built on like doing rather than being,
Mm.
that it becomes toxic. And the weird thing about it is, though, that mentality would actually help you be very successful financially.
yeah,
But it would actually leave you broken on the back end, right? Because you see a lot of Nigerians that are very successful because they're like, man, I got to go get it. I got to go get it. I got to go get it. And that being having that little bit of competitiveness is a good thing sometimes,
Hmm.
but it has to be balanced, right? Like your whole identity cannot be around all those things, because you'll meet people that are very successful, but they still can't find happiness. And it's because of that. So for me, there was a lot of comparison. There was a lot of those things that were going on. Like, why aren't you like that person's kid? Why aren't you like this person's kid? Like your individuality was not celebrated as much. It was like, well, this person's doing better than you. You should be more like him. Um,
Hmm.
and on the flip end, there was the school I went to, the elementary school I went to. The motto was "I can." So some of that was rooted in this perspective of like, if he could do it, you could do it. My mom would always say, he doesn't have two heads, so you could do it too, right? So there was a good part to that where these conversations are very like, there's a duality in these conversations, because like there's a lot of good things that came from the way I was brought up, like discipline, a lot of respect, a lot of like believing that I could do anything. But also there's a lot of shame. There's a lot of perfectionism that comes from that, and a lot of bad things that come with that as well too. Because I think sometimes when we talk about these things, we do ourselves a disservice by not talking about both ends. So a
Right.
lot of the healing that I'm experiencing is moving away from that space of, one, the grief of not having the relationship I wanted to have with my parents growing up. That
Hmm.
has been a big one, because you come to America, and not to say everyone in America has great relationships with their parents. I just believe the way it's set up, it's more relational. It's not like there's hierarchies, but like it's more relational, right? Like I remember one time, and like there was this girl that I liked in school, in Nigeria. This is like right before I came, probably like a year or so before I came. We'd talk all the time on the phone and all these different things. And one time she actually called my mom's phone. Stupid idea. Called my mom's phone. And like it was just very embarrassing, because like she called me and my mom was like, put it on speaker. And like I said, I grew up with 12 people in the house. All these people listening. And it's just weird. So like instead of my mom using that space to like have a conversation with me, and not to say my mom's a bad person. I don't want to paint a bad picture of my mom. Instead of her using that space to have a conversation with me and like, oh, like what's going on with you and her? Like, what do you feel for her? All these different things, right? That's a very sacred space for her to like actually dig into my love life, or understanding what I'm attracted to and all these different things. It was like, don't ever talk to this girl again. My mom literally came to school and talked to the girl.
Wow.
So those
Jeez.
things were just very embarrassing and annoying. So grieving that space where it's like a lot of kids have a relationship with their parents where they could talk to them about anything, or they
Yeah,
could talk to them about like, oh, my girlfriend and all these different things. And now that my parents are trying to build that relationship, it's a lot harder, because like now, like I'm an adult and all these different things. um, they're like, "Oh, why don't you tell us about this and that?" I'm like, "Well, like because for a big portion of my life, it was taboo to speak about those things. You don't get to just like press a button and get it on the other side." So for me, a lot of healing is coming from like trying to understand those relationships with my parents better, grieving the relationship I didn't have with them in that sense, um, not not building my identity about it around the things that I accomplish, building my identity in terms of being rooted in who I am, how I show up, my value system. Another thing is not like I said, not letting that like disturb my relationship with God as well, and not contaminate my relationship with God as well, because there's also religious trauma that comes from my parents and the spaces I grew up in, that I sometimes look at God from the same lens as well too. So yeah, it's a whole journey of sometimes jealousy and envy and resentment, because of like the things I didn't have growing up in terms of relational dynamics, but also understanding that like, yes, I didn't have that. There's still space for me to build that with them now, even though it's a little harder, and even though you have to actually fight against like the internal feelings you feel, because it just doesn't feel natural with them. And the weird thing about it is like, I'm a very, very open, vulnerable person by nature. Like all my friendships are very vulnerable. All my connections are very real and authentic. And like, I'm very comfortable in that space. But whenever it comes to my parents, I am not at all. Like whenever they
Mm.
ask me those questions, I
Wow.
naturally shut down. It's like the weirdest thing. Like I just get very defensive and very protective. Like I'm just like, nah, well, you don't need to know about that, or
Wow.
I just don't even want to engage. It just don't feel right. So that is a place that I know I still have to heal from, and that's a space that I still have to grow in. So just little things like that, man. Just Nigerian trauma, religious trauma,
Mhm.
um,
Yeah.
and all those different things. So yeah, I would say that's what I'm healing from.
Let me ask you: do you have a sense of fear toward your parents? Like, are you afraid
Nah,
of them?
nah, not at all. I've always been stubborn. So like when I was younger, it was fear, but also it moved into like resentment and anger more than it was fear. Like now, I don't fear them because I'm not scared to like Mecca knows. I'm not scared to tell my parents anything.
Mhm.
I'm not scared to call them out or anything now, right? Like if they like budge on my boundaries, sometimes to a fault, I'll actually want to like make it known that like, yo, you can't do that with me anymore.
Good.
So it's not fear. It's more in. I think honestly, it's more in like resentment. I
Mhm.
think whenever I sit down and talk about my to my therapist about it, it's more in resentment where it's
And
like
hurt.
and hurt where it's like, well, like when I needed you to do this when I was younger, you weren't there, and also you shut this door down. So why should I open up this door to you now at your convenience?
Yeah.
So,
Oh, that's
so I would
dope.
say that's what it is.
When you were speaking, it reminded me of something my therapist said, and it was like trauma can present in two different, well, multiple ways, but like the presence of something bad or the absence of something good, right? And so like they were there and they were present in your life and they were doing good, but like you wanted this different type of connection with them in some type of way where you could go and talk to your mom about the girlfriend and things like that. So like it's just interesting to hear because I share a lot of similar feelings toward my parents and the relationships I wish that we had then and still I wish we had them today. And so no, I appreciate that. Like I appreciate that. Thanks for sharing. Uh Mecca.
Yeah, I was laughing at the end because like I've been around Vic with his parents, and I've seen that interaction before, and I've seen how like I've seen Vic in that moment. And it's from the outside looking in, it's funny because like I know Vic, and it's just like when Vic is like very like set on something, and I laugh because me and him are very similar in that space.
Mhm.
Like when Vic is set on something, that nigga is set. Like you're not changing. Nobody is changing. And so and sometimes it's funny because I watch his parents try their best to assuage or change his mind, and the nigga is like, and it's and some it, and it cracks me up because it's like I don't think they've accepted that he's not changing his mind,
Mhm.
and so they still, and same with my parents. So it's just kind of it's always fun to watch that because it happens to me too.
Yeah.
But for me, I would say, uh, and I would say I'm actually really proud of this, but I would say I'm healing from uh, my relationship growing up with my aunt specifically, and I'm actually not excited to talk about it, but like I've noticed like the intense feeling of hate and anger is gone. Like I don't feel that anymore, right? Like I genuinely feel content. Yeah, I appreciate that. Cause like Vic knows, bro. Like there, I would say once I got in a relationship with my wife, I didn't realize how much love I wasn't getting from my
Mm.
house, and it made me so fucking angry.
Mm.
Right? It made me so angry because like when I was with my wife, like she had unconditional love for me, right? Like
Mhm.
certain things that I would do, and like I'm expecting a completely different, like I'm expecting what I'll get at home, like whatever, like anger or just reactionary shit. And it was the complete opposite with my wife. It was complete grace. It was like forgiveness, like let's talk about it. Why did this happen? And like hear me out. You know what I mean? Like, and just
Mhm.
like helping me process through that shit. And it's such a stark difference. It was such a stark difference, bro. And so the more I, you know, we spent me and my wife spent time together, I was realizing I was like, damn, like, bro, for 16 years I haven't had this shit.
Mhm.
You know what I mean? I haven't had this type of love. And so like naturally I didn't know how to receive it.
Mhm.
It actually took me a very long time to learn how to receive the love I get from my wife. It took me a very long time,
Mhm.
just because I feel like, kind of like what Vic said, like I had to earn it, and like I didn't deserve it. I had to earn it, but she was giving it to me because she loved me, just because
Right.
that's just who she was. I could not conceptualize that shit
Right.
because in the spaces that like me and Vic grew up, it was just very much like if you didn't do the chores that I said you should do, like one, like you're gonna hear from me, like you're gonna either get the consequences, either getting beat or getting berated. But even if you did do it, I'm not gonna like show you a lot of love. I'm just not gonna berate you. I'm just
Mhm.
not gonna beat you. I'm just gonna be like, all right, cool, you did it. Cool, good
Mm.
job. Does that make sense? Like
Mhm.
it was very much so like I'm doing this work just so I don't get my ass beat.
Mm.
Like that was
For
really
real.
that was really what it was, right? So there was a lot of contention in the house, like just every day I felt like I was walking on eggshells, bro.
Mhm.
um and I felt like I was walking in a field of landmines, and I didn't know when the next one was, where the next
Yes.
one was. And if I stepped on that land, like I didn't know if it was a small landmine or if it was a big one. And God forbid I stepped on a big one. Oh my
Mhm.
God. I don't know what the fuck was going to happen, right?
Right.
And I had a lot of resentment towards my aunt, just because personally I feel like she needed help personally. Um, like I feel like she was just she stayed in a very bad space, because she wasn't just like that to me. She was like that to her kids as well. And that really broke my heart because it's like I know the damage that her behavior did to me. And then watching that, and thankfully I grew up with my mom for 11 years. I stayed with my mom for 11 years, and my mom was very loving, very, very loving woman, completely different, like night and day, literally. So I at least got to experience that with a parent, but my cousins didn't.
Right.
That's all they knew. And
Right.
so my heart breaks for them constantly because it's like they don't know anything outside of this shit.
Right.
You know what I mean? And like I can't go to them and tell them like yo, like this is not what's up. Like this is actually, because one, that's their mom,
Right.
right? So there's still like this warped thing of like they're still gonna love their mom, um, because that's their mom. But I also don't want to like taint their view. I don't want to taint their view of their mom. Instead, I just want to show them a different way,
Mhm.
right? So um yeah, that broke my heart to see that because I see how that affects them as well, right? I could
Right.
tell like they were experiencing at least some slight form of depression. Like I could feel it, I could sense it. But I just didn't know how to broach that conversation because it's like I don't think they knew what it was.
Mhm.
You know what I mean? But I could see it. Um so there was hurt from there, and there was also hurt from my uncle from not like taking control of that situation. And like, because he recognized it too. Like she was a menace to everybody, bro.
Mm.
Like when I said, like, she was the only woman in the house, but she was a menace to
Mhm.
every other person. It was 4 guys, and she had him like she was a menace to him too, and like he would recognize it. And I think looking back now, it's just like why didn't you do more to stop or at least reduce her effect on us kids? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So there was hurt there. But like I said, I think what helped me heal was therapy. But the main thing, honestly, was my wife, bro. Like it was just her being her and just showing me her unconditional love and showing me what unconditional love looked like.
Mhm.
Um, it just it showed me that there was another way to be, and there was another way to live life, that I didn't have to be constantly on guard and always trying to fight a motherfucker, you know what I mean? Or trying to like react to something, or always trying to like watch my back because, I don't know if something I said to you ticked you off enough to where like, does that make sense? Like you want to
Yeah.
like fight me, or you want to like start an argument and shit like that. But with her,
Mhm.
it was just complete opposite, right?
Mhm.
And so that's really where a lot of my healing came from, was my
Mm.
relationship with my wife,
That's
and just her
beautiful.
being her, and just her showing me unconditional love, and just showing me what it looks like to have somebody constantly in your corner, and somebody who really really loves you, and somebody um, um, who is on your team, like literally. And
Mhm.
so yeah, it took me a while. It took me a while to recognize that and to accept that. Thankfully, through therapy, I was able to go through therapy and talk a lot about that stuff. um but yeah, bro, that relationship healed me a lot. and
That's what's
and I
up.
think that's kind of what helped me to get to where I'm at now, is to realizing that like my aunt just needed help.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like I don't hate her like I used to. In fact, I have a little bit of compassion for her. I feel kind of bad for her a little bit.
Yeah.
um I don't talk to her though. There's nothing to talk about, me and
Right.
her. Like I don't call her, she doesn't call me. Like she tried, like when I first moved out the crib, she would try to call me like once every other week or whatever. I won't pick up. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
Like I'll call her back like after like 3 or 4 days. I don't want to,
Mhm.
like, there's nothing to talk about. Like we don't have a
Yeah.
relationship.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like there's no need in trying to force this shit. Like let's not
Right.
force it. Let's just understand I don't like you, really. Um
It's real.
you I don't know if you like me, but I know I don't like you, and I'm not gonna hide that from you. You know what I
Right.
mean? I'm not gonna sugarcoat that shit
Yeah.
because I don't agree with the way you raised me
Mhm.
at all. I
Yeah.
don't agree with the way you raise your kids at all. Yeah, they're smart as fuck. One of my cousins is in MIT doing fucking trying to be a doctor and get his MD and a PhD.
Wow.
Smart ass motherfucker.
Wow.
Smart as hell. Right? But if you spend enough time around him and you see his demeanor, you see like, damn, like something he's going through that he's not saying, or he can't recognize.
Yeah.
You know what I
That's
mean?
yeah.
And now, good or bad, I don't know, I've kind of put the weight on myself to be able to like build that relationship with him, and like to show him that, hey, yo, like there's another way. There's another way to be. There's another way to see love. There's another way to accept love. You know what I'm saying?
Mhm.
Um, and so I think there's going to be a lot of healing that comes from that relationship as well,
Yeah.
just because we grew up in the same house, and
And where was
he
your
felt
mom? Where was your mom during this time?
my mom, she was between Nigeria, North Korea, and Maryland.
Okay. As a
So
diplomat, you said. Right.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah, as a diplomat. So I hadn't lived with my mom for 16 years. So
Okay.
it was a while since I lived with her. But and then also seeing how that affected my mom too, right? Like how much, like when I say regret and shame, like she has a lot of regret and shame for sending me away because
Mhm.
she feels like she could have controlled that, or she, it's kind of like if you had a kid and you sent your kid to go live with one of your family members, and you know how you sent that kid off, you know who that kid was, and then when that kid comes back, completely different from how you know
Mm. Mm.
you left them, it does something as a parent. It's like, damn, like this shit this decision that I made
Mm.
affected my child in such a way that it broke him. And there's nothing as a parent that I could do to fix it, because that's 16 years at that point. I'm not there. You know what I mean? So that, hear my mom talk about that as well definitely broke my heart, because it's like, those are the situations that we have, right? Like we were in North Korea. That's where we got shipped to, or that's where my mom got sent to, and there weren't any schools out there, and so only option she had was here with my uncle and my aunt. She chose my aunt.
Yeah.
And she didn't think that I was gonna go through what I went through, but she did all that in faith, kind of like what Vic was talking about earlier. You just kind of like got to jump in sometimes. She had faith in my aunt. And then having to see the effect that it had on me definitely hurt her too. So I've seen the effects on my aunt, like on like the behaviors of my aunt on different people that are connected to her, right?
Yeah.
And so that's also another reason why I was just like, man, like I just feel bad for her. I feel really bad for her, because like, she's probably been through some shit in her past that she doesn't talk about. I've never known about. And she's took it out on her kids. And on top of that, it was a very, very, very patriarchal household. And I think she took out some of her anger on us as well.
Yeah.
I think she took out, because we were the only thing. We were one of the only things that she had some type of control over, some type of power over. And so I think she took a lot of that anger out on us and abused that. I don't think she knew what she was doing, but I think, but anyway.
What's up, Vulnerability Muscle fam? We've got an amazing sponsor to talk about today, and it's a product that has truly made a difference in my life. Call Me Go. Now, I only bring products that I believe in, and this is one that has been a game changer for me. Whenever I feel stressed, whenever I feel like things are just piling up and the anxiety is really cranking up, I turn to my Call Me Go device. This is it right here. This thing is literally a game changer, and I was skeptical about it at first, but what makes this thing stand out? It combines 3 scientifically proven methods to reducing anxiety. First, there's a grounding technique, multisensory stimulation that really helps you stay present. So you have the feel of it, there's a vibration factor, there's lights, there's also smell. Then there's that scented element, tapping into the power of aromatherapy. But here's the kicker, and what really sets Calm Me Go apart is personalized breathing regulation. It's like having your own breathing coach in your pocket, in your hand. And so I use this when I'm gearing up for podcasts, when I'm starting my day, when I'm calming down and chilling out at the end of my day. It has been an absolute game changer. I love Calm Me Go because it's not a one size fit all solution. It's tailored to me, my body, my unique stress triggers. The impact it has on my daily life is undeniable. Now, I want you to experience the calm that Calm Me Go can bring to your life. Head over to callmego.com and use the code Reggie444 at checkout for a fantastic $30 off. Trust me, this is an investment in your well-being that you won't regret. Visit callmego.com, use the code Reggie444 at checkout, and let Callmego help you find calm in the storm.
Yeah, it was long-winded,
Man,
all over the
no,
place
it's
a little
good.
bit,
It's
but
beautiful, man. That's the spirit of embracing vulnerability right there.
yeah,
Like
for sure.
that, I when we met, and we actually, it was after we met. We were at Plain Jane for
Yeah.
some reason. I forget whatever the thing that happened.
It was some
before that.
event, yeah.
Yeah, but we ended up at Plain Jane,
Yeah.
and we were sitting there at the bar talking, and
Yep.
that's why I really felt connected to you, because
Yep.
there was this sense of like, from the past, you would have been one of my best friends, and also the dude that I wanted to fight at the same time. Isn't that crazy? Like, I was like, there's something so weird here, and I felt
Yeah.
it, and it was like, and like, so
That's
like
crazy, because I
like-
felt that same shit, bro. What the fuck? I'm glad you said that shit, bro. Because I'm like, bro, why do I fight with this nigga, but I also want to fight this nigga for some reason?
I think and if we hadn't gone through the healing, if we aren't going through the healing journey that we go through, like that may have been the case, right? That could have happened.
That's
but
crazy.
Like, it was just like, man, I love this dude, but I'm gonna beat him up for some reason. Like, or he might beat me up. I don't know. But like, that's crazy, bro. So like,
that's wild.
But I can I appreciate you for sharing like just the journey from where it was and the harm and hurt and how you felt about it, right? I carry a lot of
Yeah.
hate and resentment toward people.
Yeah.
And one thing that I've come to, like, I think my book, writing the book, and that process of understanding, even though I couldn't have conversations with them and interview certain people, but understanding that there was something in their life that
Mm-hmm.
impacted the way that they showed up, and
Mm-hmm.
hearing the phrase, we are all victims of victims. Like when I
Mm.
heard that, I was like,
Damn.
damn, damn, the person who
Damn.
hurt me was hurt by somebody, and
Yep.
somebody hurt them. And it's just
Yep.
like, okay. And it allowed me this level of grace, understanding, and love, like to show that unconditional love, even though I may not receive it back.
Mm-hmm.
And that was huge for me. And I mean,
Mm.
like, kudos to your wife too for being that person, because like I think my wife was the first person that I truly start to open up to and trust about
Mm-hmm.
things. And
Mm-hmm.
she came from a different perspective of like, just like, she's gonna love, like, it's not like when
Yeah.
conflict arises, it's not, oh fuck that, we boom boom button heads. It's
Yeah.
like, I'm still gonna lead with love. And so that
Right.
helped, that did a lot for me as well, man. So like,
Yeah.
it's connected on
That's the
so many ways, bro. Hell yeah. And I
Mm,
want to
yeah.
crazy
kudos.
how healing love is when
It's
it's like in purest
yes,
form. It's like the most
Mm-hmm.
yes.
healing thing of all time.
It
Like,
is, man.
Mm-hmm.
It absolutely is. And for both of you, like Vic, you started it opening up, talking about community and connection, and to hear, Mecca, how like you've built that, and like to go through trauma, and especially complex trauma over prolonged periods of time. One of the
Mm-hmm.
hardest things is to have like strong interpersonal connection and love with people. But to
Yes.
find that for both of
Yeah.
y'all, like to find that, man, I am just like so overjoyed and over, like I'm over the moon just to be able to be here and talk to y'all and find out that we really loved and wanted to kick each other's ass.
yeah.
Like, what the
And that's
fuck?
just beautiful. It's like, I
That's
think
wild.
also another epiphany I've had like in the last couple of years is like a lot of times your life is um like the way you view success and like the effectiveness of your life is also determined by your community. And I say that shit all the time. But like being intentional about building that and also being intentional about who gets into your space and who doesn't, in terms of understanding your boundaries. My therapist had a very brilliant way of breaking it down. It's like you look, it's like you have this house, right? And some people you wave, they're at the door, you see them past your fence and you wave at them. Some people you don't even wave at them. Some people you let them into your compound. Some people you let them into your house. Some people you let them into your room or whatever, right? Some people you let into your bathroom, whatever. But understanding the space for boundaries, right? Because I think sometimes for me, I'm a very outgoing person. I like to meet people. I like to go out and talk to people. Sometimes I think like I meet somebody and like, oh, because we kicking in, we have a good like bond or whatever here, that they need to be like one of my closest friends, you know? So understanding that like because you're community oriented as well too, understanding boundaries in that space as well too, and how
Yeah.
your community should be a very sacred space, a
Yeah.
space where you can be your full self, a space where you don't have to perform, a space where they're showing up for you, you're showing up for them in different ways,
Yeah.
where there's like a congruency to the effort that's being put. And effort looks different, right? Sometimes the way we show love looks different. Like I might be a quality of time person, and Mecca might be a words of affirmation person. But
Mm-hmm.
being intentional about like understanding how that person wants to receive love and all these different things, because like I said, at the root of it, like the right spaces and the right connections will actually, they're very very healing. And my
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
friend Ariel made a brilliant point. She's one of the most brilliant people I know. And she talked about how like we get broken in relationship, but also we heal in relationship.
Yes.
Yeah.
So understanding that like just because we get broken in certain relationships doesn't necessarily mean that we need to shut the door on relationships. Because like you said, building interpersonal connections when you've been through trauma and um, been through fractures in relationships, a lot of times there's a hesitance there because you're like, man, I want to protect myself. I don't want to get hurt. But that's just the nature of life, right? Like we're all gonna get into other relationships that are gonna hurt us, right? Like we're gonna trust people that we shouldn't trust and different things. But I think at the end of the day, love is way too powerful and way too healing to 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 not fully engulf yourself in it when there's a
Mhm.
possibility of it. So
Absolutely.
yeah, that's what these stories are just telling me, man.
Absolutely.
It's like
Absolutely.
And
Yeah.
just also doing it for the next generation as well
Mm-hmm.
too. Like Michael's doing it for his cousin now because he understands what he's going through. But also understand that because we didn't get something in our childhood or whatever, we still have the space to do it for others.
Yeah.
And just because we didn't get what we needed in certain spaces doesn't necessarily mean that we can get it from other spaces, right? Like the
Yeah.
love that you might have wanted from your parent, you might get that from a mentor. The love
Mm-hmm.
that you might have wanted from an ex partner, you might get that from a
Mm-hmm.
future partner or
Right.
whatever. So understanding that like different roles in our life um, play different roles. I mean, different people in our life play different roles, and
Yeah.
just embracing the concept of that and letting
Man,
that
That's dope.
fluidity happen.
I want to say something to that real quick. One, I want to say I've definitely given Vic his flowers. Like I've seen him grow over the years. First thing is how I've the feeling of loving and like wanting to beat your ass or our asses, Reggie. It's the same way I felt with Vic in the beginning, right? The same exact way.
I'm
So that's
honored. Hey,
hey,
I'm honored.
that's it. Listen, that's the same exact way. We've definitely grown from that. We've grown a lot from that. But that's funny though. That's hilarious. But first, I definitely want to give Vic his flowers for because I remember when he will meet somebody one weekend and the next weekend he's talking about like, hey yo, like this is my
Yeah, it's my
you know what
guy.
I'm saying, like my brother, shit like that. And I'm just like, fam, you just met this nigga though. Like, what you mean? You know what I mean? Like, what you mean? You know what I'm saying? But that also shows just how big his heart was. And then like
Mhm.
what would fuck me up is when I see that same person like do him dirty, right?
Mm.
And like do something wrong because it's like they didn't value
Mm.
that space that he brought them in. You know
Yeah.
what I'm saying? And like that shit will fuck me up is because like, man, like this person that you really like Vic saw good intentions in is the same person that's what I'm saying, like doing some fucked up shit. So definitely seeing his growth in that and like realizing that like, hey, like there's certain boundaries I need to put with certain
Mhm.
people. And I've definitely seen that over time and just seeing like how that's grown. And then on top of that, fuck, I actually lost it. What was the last thing you said, Vic?
Um, oh, like the embracing the fluidity of that. Like just because you get certain things,
Oh,
you didn't
yeah,
get something in one space
yeah,
doesn't necessarily mean that you can't get it in another space.
yeah,
Like different
yeah.
people play different roles in our life, and embracing that.
So with that, I didn't grow up with my dad. And so like my mom has always said not great things about him. So like I've always had like this weird idea of my dad.
Mhm.
But I would say like so my jujitsu coach, he like he has a daughter. He has a young daughter. So like he's just now coming into like his dad era, his fatherhood era, and he treats a lot of his students um like his children. Like I remember he was promoting one of the ladies in our class, and he was like, "Yo, like I really see this woman as my daughter." He was bawling, crying, like promoting her,
Mm.
and you could just feel like his genuineness of really caring about everybody. Like it's not, it's like it's one thing when you hear somebody say, "Oh yeah, I care about you," but like when you really see it, like in action with him, like he's very firm, but he's also very caring. But my point is, there was a time where like I was just going through some shit, like I had got rejected from this job interview or whatever, and I was just like feeling down because I had just been getting rejected from job interviews. And I went to jiu-jitsu. I was like, I'm finna go and just beat somebody's ass, man, get the shit out of me. And I went in, and he could tell like my demeanor was down. And he looked at me. He was like, he stopped. Like he saw me doing some shit, and he looked at me. He stopped. He's like, bro, are you okay? I ain't gonna lie, bro. I felt like breaking down in tears right there
Wow.
because I was like, damn, like this nigga sees me, but he also cares about me. You know what I mean? And like I felt like that was kind of what I wish I would have had from a father figure. Um, you know what I'm saying? Shit like that. And I was like, damn, like, is this what it would have felt like to have a dad that really cared about you and shit like that
Mm.
and stuff like that. So
Mm.
that
Mm.
moment itself it was a very healing moment from another man, right? Because I used to have like terrible, like not terrible relationships, but like not the greatest relationship with men. Like it took me a while for me to respect certain men, just because of like how I grew up with my mom. Like my mom just, like I said, didn't speak the greatest about my dad. So I'm just like, man, if my dad is this, like this, like this, like I need to see you do great things before I respect you as a man. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And so that relationship right there was healing for me because it's like, I don't know, like it just I can't fully explain yet what it did for me, like my own wound with my dad, but it did something. It did something very powerful to the point where I wanted to break down crying
Yeah.
and respect him a lot more and value him a lot more as a coach. So to your point is, with Vic, whereas you can find love in different, what you were missing in one area, you could definitely find that in another area.
For
Absolutely.
sure, for sure.
Man,
I think
that was
we got
beautiful.
to give Reggie his flowers too, man.
Oh
Like,
man,
I
nah.
think from the first day I met you, I met you at your book signing with Deshaun and all that, man.
Wow, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Yeah, I
Deshaun
remember
and
now.
Hale. Yeah,
that's
so I had like
crazy.
seen you. Obviously, I'd seen you on like Instagram and stuff like that, but just like meeting you and like seeing like how genuine you was, and like just like the natural connection. I never had the thought of fighting you. I don't like. I don't know what y'all niggas have going on, but it was just cool. Like we just hit it off. You was cool as hell, and
That's
day
good.
one, we were already having like really really deep conversations. So I think that's a testament to you, your character, like knowing yourself enough, but also being able to create that safe space for other people. It shows that that's one of your values, and you continue to do that with this podcast, and you're having important conversations, man. Like the imagery of a black man that is one successful by societal standards, but also being vulnerable and open about things that he's gone through and how he's working through that. It's just a very empowering, powerful thing, and it's like you're touching lives. You're touching lives that you might never even get to encounter. And I think
For sure.
that's the real powerful thing. That's a real powerful thing right there. So man, like just keep doing your thing, man. Just wanted to give you your flowers as well, man.
For
Salute,
sure.
brother. Salute, man. Both of y'all, like, love y'all to death. Before we wrap up, I got a rapid response. Just a couple of questions. First thing that popped in your head, answer that, and then, we'll start with Emeka, then Vic, then Emeka, so that like you got a little time to think. All
Yeah.
right, but so E, what comes to mind when you hear the word vulnerability?
Me taking my heart out, giving it to somebody else, and a knife, and allowing them to do what they will with that.
Damn,
I know.
big.
For me, it's like similar, just jumping off like a really tall building or like this big height, right? Like this ledge or whatever, and trusting the other person is going to catch me. Or in another perspective, it's like I'm jumping off a plane and they have the button to press in terms of like for my life jacket to be activated, and I
Mm,
got to trust them enough to value my life and value me enough to do that and to show up for me in that sense. So,
damn.
um, so yeah,
So
that's all.
yeah, yeah. Them two might be the best answers to that question that I've ever gotten. Uh, if you could have a conversation with anybody, living or dead, Vic, who would it be?
Whoo, living or dead, man. It's so hard for me to choose one person.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I think honestly, it'd probably be Bell Hooks. Like, what
Mm.
are we talking about? Like family members? I'm going to
No,
take
no,
family
no.
members.
Anybody.
I think like family members is too easy though. Like for
Yeah.
me, it's like I wanted people to have like I've not met or whatever. Like people I
Okay.
don't have
Okay.
like connect. I would say probably Bell Hooks.
Okay.
The reason why I would say Bell Hooks is because a lot of the tenets in my life are very congruent to what she stood for
Mm-hmm.
in terms of politically, the way she looked at politics, the way she looked at the world. I think just her books have shaped a lot of the way I think in terms of like love, like the
Mm-hmm.
centrality of that. Her book, All About Love, was one of the biggest things that changed my life in terms of like how I looked at love and healthy love and different things. Her book, The Will to Change, changed my views on how I looked at patriarchy and a lot of different things. So probably Bell Hooks, because I think we would be able to have a very, very evolved conversation where we could hit so many different things. Like we could talk about God, we could talk about
Mm-hmm.
we could talk about God, religion, we could talk about societal issues, we could talk about racism, we could talk about like there's just so many places we could go with that. So I would say probably Bell Hooks, right?
Hey,
Because
that's
there's
good.
other people that I would love to talk to, but I feel like it would be too stratified to one space. You know,
I
I
like
think she
that.
had the depth to meet me in so many different ways, and I could learn from her in all those spaces. So yeah, probably
Mhm.
dogs. And
Dope.
she's my favorite writer, so I guess there's an intimate thing there.
Shout out. I like that.
I would say family member. I'll probably say my father. Just having like a
Mm.
really in-depth conversation with him, just asking him every fucking question I can think about,
Mm.
and just being able to have that type of interaction with my dad.
Dope.
And I think that's very important for me now, because as I'm planning to have kids of my own, um, I think I see more of the importance um, of like how his decisions are going to affect the way that I parent.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? And just trying to understand that, and trying to understand like why he made certain decisions, what he would like, how he thought about certain things. You know what I mean? And because yeah, like as I'm preparing to have kids of my own, like these are there are questions that I have that I'm just like, damn, I actually don't know the answer to these questions. Like how would I actually, if my kid asked me this, like how would I go about answering that? I don't know yet. You know what I mean?
Dope.
So
Yeah.
that's probably somebody I probably want to have a
Man,
conversation with.
What about not
it's
family though?
powerful.
Now family, C.S. Lewis, that all
Ooh,
day,
that's a
every
good
day.
one. That's a great
Yeah,
one.
it's my favorite writer of all time. Like he's written about, kind of like what Vic said, just
Yeah.
a lot of
A
different
lot of
shit.
stuff.
Yeah.
A lot of different shit. And I love the way it's very confusing the way he writes, but I love it because it makes me think. It
Yes.
makes me think, and it opens up new ways to think
Yeah.
about stuff.
Wow.
And he's just a phenomenal writer. And the way he paints
Yeah.
pictures about certain things, the way he talks about certain ideas. Very powerful writer. Very powerful
Bet.
writer.
Yeah.
All
I
right.
think for me,
Still on.
family member.
Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, my fault. Because Emeka gave
You
two.
want to? No, you want to mention his family member? Let's go ahead and hear who it is.
I think what you said. I would probably say my dad's mom, because my dad lost his dad when he was like a baby.
Okay.
Then his mom raised him, and she passed when he was like, I think in college around then. So like in a very, 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 very important stage of his life. And I think there's a lot of things that my dad does that I want more perspective on, and there's a lot of things that my like just patterns that he has that I wonder where it came from. Um, so I think having a conversation with her on like how she raised him, how that dynamic was, I think would actually unlock a lot of different things between me and my dad's relationship. So I think it's kind of similar to Emeka's answer in terms of like the father figure and how that plays into me becoming a
Yeah.
father one day. Because I think at the root of it was like his relationship with his mom. So getting to connect with her, understanding her perspective, understanding the world she grew up in. She grew up in a village. They didn't have shit. They grew up in like poverty, like real poverty. So it would just answer a lot of questions, or just give me a lot of perspective to solve certain mysteries that I have.
That's dope. Next
Yeah.
question. I'm gonna remind the Village Boys. Rapid response.
Yeah.
Look at him. He like, I don't know. All right, no, I'm just playing. But answer, like, I love these answers. I'm trying to be cognizant of y'all's time. I got all day. It's a Saturday.
Yeah.
Like, if you
I
listen
got
to
time
this,
too, bro.
we're having a blast. Like, we literally could be here all day long, and I just don't want to
Literally.
keep YouTube that long. So, but
Sure.
what is one of your favorite childhood memories, Emeka?
Switzerland. Growing up in Switzerland. That's a place of a lot of my happiest memories. From school, from my friends. Like one of my best friends was Portuguese. I remember that. I had two girlfriends at the same time. One was white, one was Asian. my birthday, my birthday celebrations at McDonald's. You know what I mean? Like the haircut I used to have. My uncle used to cut my hair and do this quickly line, and
Okay.
and he called it "Girls Follow Me." My
Okay.
gold chain. You know what I'm saying? Like stealing from the local store, and then when one of my friends, Muhammad, I think that was his name, was 6 years old, and then my uncle catching me and I'm getting beat. The whoopings I used to get from my mom, but also the love I got. I got chicken pox. That's when I first had chicken pox. That's where I first had to do
Wow.
backflips. That's when I learned Yoruba. My aunt taught me how to braid hair. Like it was a lot of memories, bro. I ain't gonna lie.
Wow.
Getting relaxers to get S curls in my hair
Yeah.
and shit. A lot of
Wow.
memories of Switzerland, bro. A lot of memories. A lot of memories.
I want
A
to
lot of
talk to you
great memories.
offline about that because that sounds
For
amazing,
sure.
bro.
For
Yeah,
sure.
for real.
For me, probably just soccer, man. Like soccer was like my first love. Like it was the first thing that I just felt free doing, right? Like I
Yeah.
just got this ball and I just there was a lot of support around it, right? Because my mom knew I loved soccer, my uncles knew I
Yeah.
loved soccer. Everybody,
Yeah.
everyone around me knew that was my love. So
Mhm.
probably soccer, man. Just playing in the streets of Nigeria, like trying skills that I saw on TV, then trying it out on kids, and
Yeah.
it actually working, getting recognition for being a good player and all these different things. So I would say soccer for sure because I think that was like one of the first things where I was like, I just loved doing it. Like I didn't want anything out of it. I just wanted to pour into it, and like if it didn't work out, it didn't work out. But there was a freeing thing about it that it did like that. It just felt like spiritually I was supposed to be doing that, but
Mhm.
also it just felt like I know it's cliche. It felt like all your worries in the world were gone. It was this very sacred space for me to just be myself fully. I could express myself fully.
Mhm.
I could express things that I didn't have the words to say. I could do it with a soccer ball. I could show my personality the full spectrum of that. So I would say soccer for sure because
Huge.
it was big foundational piece of my progression and who I am today.
That's huge. And so, with that moment in mind, what advice, as the men that you are today, what advice would you give that child today in that moment that you were in?
It's funny because we always ask this question. And then now we're getting to think about this question. That's cool.
For me, I would say if I was talking to a young Victor, I would say you love this soccer ball so much and you love like if it makes you feel free and you feel like you spiritually you should be doing all these things, but don't pigeonhole yourself. I think in a big portion of my life, right? I was always a really good soccer player since I was little. Like I was one of those kids where like I was playing against older kids when I was little. And I just always been really good. So I in the back of my mind, I always had the dream of being professional, right? And it seemed attainable to me because I like as I progressed, I was getting better and better. Even when I wasn't the best player, I knew that I had the potential to become that. So I think sometimes I let that color my view of like my future so much that it made me not cultivate so many different skills that I had as well too, right? Um, it was till later in my life where I was like, oh shit, like what if I don't become a professional soccer player? Maybe I should. There's this thing that I actually am good at. Maybe I should cultivate this skill. So I would say don't pigeonhole yourself. Try different things. Trying different things does not actually take away from your love for soccer. Because my mom would try. Actually, phenomenal job. She did a phenomenal job of trying to get me to play the drums or play the piano or try different things. But for me, it was like, nah. Like I just want to play soccer. So just don't pigeonhole yourself because you just never know where things are going to take you, and
Mhm.
also the skills that you would have built in that time could have been very beneficial as you grown. I'm losing my train of thought. Those skills that you would have built in that space would have been really beneficial as you grow to be an adult and actually engage with the real world. So yeah, I would say that.
That's dope. Mecca.
I would say just keep living and keep um, try to remember everything that you're experiencing and try to um, put a bookmark on these memories because these memories are what's gonna color the way that you see life. You know, like um, when I was in Switzerland, I was living, bro. I was living just being free, and uh, there's some days now where like it's hard days, and I just think back to those moments, and I just get happy again. You know, because like I remember a lot of shit that happened in Switzerland. I wish I would have remembered more. Obviously, my memory, our memory fails us over time. But that would just be my advice, man. It's just like, man, just keep living because these
Mm,
memories right here is what's gonna get you through tough times in the future. So
that's
that's really
beautiful.
it.
That's
Yeah.
beautiful. Man, Y'all got me
This is
reflecting
great.
back. I'm trying to think. Yeah, like that's beautiful. All right.
That's the crazy thing about being on this side. Cause like
Yeah.
I be having
Yeah.
It's
questions I want
different,
to
bro.
ask it.
Yeah,
Because I'm
And I'm
usually
like, are we not supposed to ask him a
right.
question now?
I know, man. I want to answer them right now, but I'm gonna do I'm probably gonna do a segment where I sit down and all the questions that I ask everybody else, I'm gonna end up
Yeah,
answering for a whole episode
for sure.
myself. So y'all will
That'd be
get the
awesome.
answer to that. But two more questions. And what is one thing you do to relax when you're feeling stressed? Really trying to provide some kind of, therapeutic or just release for people who may not know different things. So what is one thing you do when you're feeling stressed?
One thing I do when I'm feeling stressed, take a shower. Uh,
Mm.
I like taking long hot showers in the dark. I ain't gonna lie.
Mm.
Turn the lights off, and make sure the water is hot. And I just sit in the tub and I just let the water hit me and I
Mm.
just relax, and just
That's
think,
dope.
and just I turn the lights off because like I don't want any distractions. Like it's kind of like a sensory deprivation in a way,
Mm-hmm.
where like it's completely dark. I just feel the hot water and my mind just goes. And
Mm-hmm.
I think about a lot, I process a lot, and that really helps me decompress
Wow.
from stress. Yeah,
I like that. Thank you. I'm gonna use that.
appreciate it for sure.
For me, I move my body. Two things. I meditate. I just sit down, put on. I have this soundtrack. It's on YouTube. It's very easy to find. It says soundtrack for anxiety.
Mm,
I put that on. Put my headphones in. I just sit down, meditate, deep breaths, and visualize things that I want to happen out of life. So meditation has been huge for me for that. Then I just move my body. I go for a run. I work out. I go to jiu-jitsu class or I go box. I do something that like naturally puts me in the space of movement because I've noticed that like movement does something in terms of endorphins for your brain, the science behind that, but also I just feel better and lighter after I do that physically because like I'm expanding energy, so that energy goes somewhere else, and it just kind of
Mm.
gives me a clean slate to start off from. So yeah, those two things: movement, working out, and just meditation.
That's bad. Yeah. All right. Outside of Village Boys podcast, what is the number one podcast you've ever experienced?
Embracing vulnerability with Reggie Ford. You understand me?
Sure. Yeah, same thing. Embracing vulnerability with Reggie Ford, man. I think this is a like a generation changing podcast, right? Like you there's a lot of podcasts these days. We're talking about it on our podcast that are like you can tell they're just here for the space that society is in right now, right? There's like a lot of and to each their own, right? I don't want to sound like I'm being self righteous, but there's a lot of stupid shit that's popular, right? And I think and there's a lot of stupid shit that's popular. But I think podcasts like this one that we're on right now, they change generations. So like it's like a different tax bracket of its own self, right? So
Yeah,
like I'm very, very thankful that this space exists. I'm very thankful you exist. I'm very thankful like this podcast exists because it just creates this centralized place where we could go on and listen to a vulnerable black man that's equipped with the language and understanding to talk about these things and knowledge to talk about these things, but also him bringing on other people and
yeah,
hearing their experience and all these different things. Because at the start of the podcast, one of the biggest things I mentioned was having the language to understand your experience is important, but also having the language to explain your experience also gets other people involved with that, right? It creates this tethering thing and this symbiosis that the human connection and the human experience is wired for connection, right? So
mhm,
Right.
that's what you're doing. And
yeah,
in a very long winded response, that's what you're doing right here. So
yeah,
that's very important. So at the root of it, you're changing humanity. So shout out to you for that.
yeah. And I
Man.
want to second. I want to second that too. When you said generational, it's a generation changing podcast. Is when we first started, part of the reason why you know I started the podcast was to be able to have like a recording of me. Because one thing I wish is I wish I would have heard things like this from my parents
Yeah.
and being able to listen to it now, right?
Yeah.
Like what would that look like 50 years, like listening to them 50 years ago and then being able to see them now, like it gives me like a different picture. So I want to be able to save these conversations, especially that we have, being able to pass it down to like my kids and like maybe hopefully they can pass it on to their kids. And that way that can, kind of help them understand like where they come from, like really, really where they come from, like my mind, like what I think and things like that. And I think this podcast is definitely one I'm gonna be like, hey, play this one first. You understand me? Like play this episode first. You
Yes,
feel me?
for
Because like
real.
it's such a powerful. This was a very, very powerful episode. Even for me, like it was very healing, right? Just being able to talk about this. And so I think that I'm not gonna lie to you, man. I'm excited for my kids to hear this shit. I ain't gonna lie. When they can
I
really
cannot
understand what's
wait.
going on, I'm excited for them to hear this and be able to like see what their reaction and see how they receive it, and see if they fuck with me or not. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
And
and they will, and they
Yeah,
absolutely will.
you know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Dang, man. Thank y'all. Like I receive all of that from both of you. And I give both of you your flowers as well. Just as men who are out here understanding the world and understanding themselves better each day and applying that and just trying to be just great humans, which you are. Like I have so much respect and adoration for both of y'all. So thank y'all for that. Thank y'all for being here. How can people get in touch with y'all? Because after that, like it's gonna be more people want to be on y'all's podcast. They want y'all. We want y'all. Like, so how can people get in touch with y'all individually and collectively?
Yeah, so Village Boyz podcast, VLLGBOYZ. You can find us on every platform: Spotify, iTunes, Overcast, everything. And then my individual IG is ce.akoma, AKOMA. That's where you find me. And yeah, that's about it.
Yeah,
That was it.
for me, my personal podcast, not personal podcast, my personal Instagram is VTSADO 19. So I had VTSADO 19. It's my personal page. Emeka already shouted out the podcast. So yeah, man, tap in with us. We have a lot of similar conversations. We have a phenomenal episode with Reggie. So if you like this episode, you're gonna
Yeah,
love
check out that one. Yeah.
the
I'm gonna
episode with
definitely
Reggie
link that
as
one
well.
too, so people can click on that for
So,
sure.
Yeah.
so,
Yeah. All right,
so yeah,
man.
and we're gonna link this to our page as well too,
Yeah.
man. So
Yep.
Yeah.
yeah,
For sure.
appreciate you having us on, man.
Man, with all the things that you could be doing and all the places you could be, both of y'all, I appreciate y'all being here with me, embracing vulnerability.
Of course, man.
For sure.
For
Love.
sure. Appreciate it, man.
Yes, sir.
Thank you for joining us for another powerful episode of Vulnerability Muscle. I hope you found inspiration and valuable insights that resonate with you. If you're enjoying this journey of self discovery and empowerment, there are a few ways you can support the podcast. First, make sure to hit that subscribe button so that you never miss an episode. If you've been moved by our conversations and the mission of redefining vulnerability, please consider leaving a review. Your feedback not only motivates us, but also helps others discover the podcast. Share your thoughts on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you tune in. And don't forget to spread the word. Follow us on Instagram at Vulnerability Muscle for updates, and you can connect with me personally at Reggie D. Ford on all platforms. Visit vulnerabilitymuscle.com for additional resources and upcoming episodes. And remember, embracing vulnerability is strength. Thanks for being a part of the journey. Until next time, stay empowered, stay vulnerable, and keep flexing that vulnerability muscle.